Reddit, what's your family's dark secret? Grandma was being rapped by her father when she was a little girl to about age 13 to 14. That's when she shot him in the back while he was sleeping, was hidden by her little brother, and escaped on a train going out east. Her father survived, and she never faced any consequences. Neither did he. He passed away in the 60s after abusing several more of his children and grandchildren. My grandma's stepmother, who was only a few years older than my grandma and who presumably knew of the abuse, finally apologized to her for not doing anything about it a few years before they both passed away. I found out all of this from my drunk aunt at my grandma's funeral. Now that's a dark secret. My great-grandfather was a Christian Scientist minister. They believe that the mind can cure the body, and he told the family of a girl with diabetes, a treatable disease, to pray the sickness away. The girl soon died, and the girl's father killed my great-grandfather in a murderous rage. I knew a pastor who said a spiritual solution to a physical issue is foolish, and a physical solution to a spiritual issue is foolish. It's a shame some people reject medicine. My great-aunt had a second child and gave it up for adoption because she was a newly single woman and didn't think she could provide for both kids. This apparently caused a lot of drama in our family back in the 70s, and people stopped talking to each other over it. My generation never heard a single word of any of this. Then, one day, my mom calls me to tell me about my new cousin. I was baffled and figured someone had a kid. Nope. That little girl that was given up for adoption was now in her 40s and hired a private investigator to find her biological family. She's since been assimilated into the family, and I see her regularly at family events. Hey, at least there's a happy ending. My grandfather died in 1946, before my dad was even born. We were always told he drove his truck into a ditch while drunk, fell asleep, and asphyxiated when the tailpipe got clogged with mud. He was in his early 30s at the time. Well, I got into genealogy a couple of years back and found a bunch of records and newspaper articles about the incident. Turns out Grandpa wasn't alone in the truck. He was with an underage girl, less than half his age, who also died alongside him. Obviously, this was not my grandmother. The newspapers didn't say it explicitly, but there was heavy insinuation that there was some side of the road romance happening when the fumes apparently overtook both of them. I still haven't told my dad what I found. Not sure I ever will. My mom was rapped when she was 14. Her dad, my granddad, tracked the guy down and shot him dead in a bar. A super distant uncle in my family used to get in a lot of trouble with cops. My nan and great aunt used to hide him, once hiding him in a freezer while cops searched the house. One day he ended up kidnapping an ambassador, successfully ransomed him off, tried escaping the country via boat, but the captain realized he was a crook and tried to take him to the cops. Distant uncle instead holds captain at gunpoint and dives off the boat several kilometers offland. Police never found him and assumed he drowned. Decades later, my nan got a letter from him confirming to all of us he was alive and well. My father rapped my 15-year-old sister on my 6th birthday. I had nightmares my entire childhood about her being sent away, seeing my dad arrested, and worse. My mother and aunt covered it up and didn't tell me the truth until I was in my early 20s. My paternal grandma got pregnant with my dad when she was something like 17 in a small town in northern Louisiana. She claimed my grandpa was abusive, so she and her sisters took her for New Mexico when she was 19 and my dad was a little less than 2. On the way she surprise delivered my uncle, who bears little resemblance to my dad. Obviously mom is same. She then very openly carried on an affair with her 60-ish-year-old boss until she met my step-grandpa. He was a great guy, raised my dad and uncle as if they were his own. As the story goes, step-grandpa is overjoyed when grandma gets pregnant with his baby, but my aunt comes out bearing a remarkable resemblance to grandma's boss. Uh-oh. Boss's wife shows up to the happy house with a gun and a checkbook. Says she's using one or the other to get my grandma to go away. So in like 1961 my grandma gets a check for something like $10,000 and she and step-grandpa buy a brand new house. All good, right? Nope, grandma had innumerable more affairs, was married twice more, and my step-grandpa felt so betrayed. After he raised all 3 kids, he committed suicide. Grandma tried to swoop in and take over his social security survivor benefits somehow. Right before grandma died a few years ago, she kicked her last husband out, cleaned out via joint savings, and she and my aunt and cousins took off for Arkansas. Right after I was born, my real grandpa shows up on our doorstep with literal boxes full of letters, birthday cards, newspaper clippings of my dad's activities like sports, and getting his PhD. Grandma had gone through all of them and taken the cash and checks and kept them for herself, and just to be cruel returned the remnants. Turns out grandpa was a great guy who was never abusive, missed his son like crazy, and was always working blue collar jobs, so could never really get away. Grandma actually bolted when she was 19 because she'd had an affair with the local book salesman, and his wife came only with a gun, no checkbook. Great grandmother ran a brothel. Great grandfather was murdered by brothers who decided they were both in love with my great grandmother. Great grandfather was in the KKK. The KKK was quoted in the newspaper as saying something like, "We take care of our own." The brothers were never seen or heard from again. Edit. Brothers were 2 siblings, unrelated to my family and not members of the KKK. I don't know how they planned to divide time with great grandmother. Also, when my grandfather helped lay out my great grandfather for burial, 9 bullets fell out of my great grandfather. My uncle was investigated for the Green River fillings. Years later, he was investigated for the Spokane prostitute murders. He was good friends with Yates, who was found guilty, and his saliva was found on a beer can near a dumping site. When I was a little girl, my mom told me to never get in his car if he tried to pick me up. Funny enough, he sells life insurance. I've told this story on here before. My mom's relationship with my dad was following a divorce. She had 2 kids with her first husband, a son and daughter. When she started dating my dad, as she was pregnant with my older sister, my dad molested my oldest sister. As soon as it happened, she found out about it. He tearfully confessed when confronted, told her he was sorry, and begged for forgiveness. She forgave him. He kept molesting my sister. Had my mom done the right thing, had she called the cops or even just left him, I would never have been born. Instead, I was the product of a child molester with an anger management issue, who tormented and terrorized my family until my mom left him when I was 7. My oldest sister is broken. She's got borderline personality disorder, or perhaps narcissism. She has never had a healthy relationship with another human being. She is abusive of her siblings, and none of us have a real relationship with her. I found all this out 17 years ago. It's weird to consider that I shouldn't exist, that I shouldn't be here, but it doesn't trouble me. I try to be a good person. I'm definitely not my dad. My great grandmother was married to her first husband, an Italian mobster in New York, in the early 1920s. They had 4 kids. In 1928, 6 years after they were married, she disappeared and no one in the family knew what happened to her. They all quietly assumed her husband had her killed, as it was known he was very abusive to her. Nope. She ran off with my great grandfather. They moved to Philadelphia and had changed their last names. They were always very secretive about their past. No one knew the original family names or where they had come from. Until I took a DNA test and matched with a 3rd cousin that was descended from her first set of children. Her original 4 children were sent to orphanages because the first husband couldn't take care of them. It was a big surprise for both families and some very hurt feelings for the children she had abandoned. They are in their 90s, but it affected them their entire lives. My granddad was into dating students before it became something people lost their job over. That's how our family got started. He taught, then gave extra credit to my grandmother. My grandfather went away to fight in Vietnam, and when he came back, my grandma was pregnant with my mom. We never knew who her real dad was. Found out when I was a teenager that my mom had an affair with my dad's brother, and that my brother and I might not be my dad's biological kids.